gosh, it's the mute button today. Welcome to another episode of the Make Mental Health Matters show. Being in studio has been so fun when I remember how the controls work. I am your host, Kelli Melissa Reinhardt, and I am so excited for you to be here for another episode. If this happens to be your 100th time, your first time, whatever it is, thank you so much for being here. I am loving having the in-studio interviews just because it is just a whole different vibe. And I think it's sometimes funny because, you know, the mute button happens and you would think that I don't even know how many we're in now, but I would have remembered. It's okay. And those that listen, you're like, I didn't even notice anyways. It's only when you watch. So if you're listening only, go watch because sometimes it's even more entertaining. I am going to introduce you to my guest who you can see sitting up here anyways, but let me tell you a little bit more about Valerie. So Valerie Montgomery is a licensed professional counselor in Colorado. As a middle child of two public school teachers, she became a military spouse, which brought her to Colorado. Shortly after her youngest was 15, she realized her lifelong dream of going to counseling school. She now operates her women-owned counseling business, marketing to women, but working with adults who experience less than nurturing parenting during their childhood. And we will have more conversation, so you'll find out a little bit more about Valerie, but thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So tell the audience, I gave a brief snippet of what you do, but tell the audience a little bit more about your story.
So developmental trauma, excuse me, is when you have less than nurturing behaviors by a major caregiver during childhood. There can be many things that qualify that. It's really about the child and how they interpret their safety and belonging in their original family, which actually translates to the world because our family is our first world and our first community. So I work with adults who might be struggling with depression or anxiety or even post-traumatic stress because of their childhoods. And they find that they achieve a lot in their adult life and they just don't feel good like they thought they would once they made their achievements.
Yeah. And I briefly mentioned it, but like what guided you in this direction to do this work?
I always wanted to become a counselor. That was a lifelong dream. I knew I wanted to go to counseling, which I am still and have for over 20 years now. And so I've been on both sides of the couch, if you will. But in my case, I work virtually, so my side of the Zoom room. And it's been such a gratifying experience. I think it's more of a calling than a job.
Yeah. And I guess if I think about when I was younger, I always wanted to be a teacher because my mom was a teacher. And then I grew up and I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. But I don't know if I would have necessarily been like, I want to be a counselor. But that's pretty cool that you knew that.
When I was 8 years old, the neighbors were babysitters, and there was one of their babysitting kids whose parents had divorced, and he'd had some ear pinning back surgery. Oh. And I got in trouble because I was on a side of the house that my mother wasn't used to me being on, sitting there listening to him talk about those experiences. So I was already listening and providing some space when I was 8 years old. So it's natural for me to be a listener and a reflective listener and therapist.
Wow. I have a almost 10-year-old, nine. And if I could get him to listen, that would be amazing. But I guess I have a personality. I'm much better now listening, but that I also have gone to school for that and learned how to be a better listener. But it also is now in the age that it is, the technology world, it's totally changed everything. So that's amazing at 8 years old that you were listening.
Yes, and I was the silent one in my family growing up. And I think that when you're quiet, people talk to you sometimes because they don't know what else to do. But he was on our property. He had gone outside the fence of the next door neighbor's property. So we were both, on the edge of getting in. I got in trouble, but because she couldn't find me. But that's what I was willing to get in trouble to be able to listen to him.
Wow. And I know not only what you do is amazing, but also I know you have more of a backstory, and we've talked about, I didn't read the why you're here, but if you want to tell the audience a little bit more about all of that too.
My father never let us use the word depressed in my family growing up. His mother had struggles with mental health. We wouldn't have known that at the time, but he didn't let us even use the word. And so we were trained to be very productive, to work hard, to make A's, to look good. And yet my parents brought some trauma with them that we can't help as children but inherit that. And then they've inherited everything from their parents and grandparents. And so there's been some things in my family that have been impactful to my life. When my youngest child was born, so I have 3 children, and when my youngest child was born, it was about a month after that my grandmother completed suicide. And since then, there have been 2 more in my family. And so it's not only a profession, but it is a personal experience. And my father had anger issues, and my mother tried to take care of him, and I tried to take care of my mother. So there's a lot there. I'm a lone surviving triplet that I didn't know about till I was in my later 40s. And then my mother nearly hemorrhaged to death at my birth. Oh, wow. So there's lots of trauma that, what is your cells? Remember that. And then when your brain develops, you make up these beliefs about yourself that give you some sense of control. And you make those decisions and beliefs up when your brain is developing. Like, I'm not good enough, or no one will love me, or there's a lot of grief that goes alongside this. So I'm very gentle with my clients because they're the truth knowers in their bodies.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize that you were one of triplets. I don't know if we talked about that before, but yeah. Wow. That's, very interesting. And then understanding the trauma even behind the birth, which is, I think, really cool that we're having those conversations of, like, sometimes things happen, whether it's pre-pregnancy that also translates into the pregnancy, and then during birth, and all those things that can cause traumas into childhood and adults that we don't often think about either.
That you don't really understand the impact because it's relatively new on the scene. Inherited trauma, how your genes express trauma. It's called epigenetic trauma. And then, the sperm and egg that became you, and those experiences. And then there's so many things that impact us. And I think if you've tried everything that you know of to help yourself, and it still hasn't resolved, that's when you go to counseling.
Yeah. Well, and I always say, I think that every person needs counseling or a therapist, or even the therapists need therapists, because I think just having somebody that you can talk to is really important. And maybe it's not a professional, maybe it's somebody in your life, but I also value that the professionals know a little bit more, they've gone to school to help with those things. But I think it is very valid and Awesome. I actually, just the other day, I heard on the radio that on dating profiles now, people are saying that they're going to therapists and it's like a turn on. And people are like, oh, great. You're working on yourself. I'm working on myself. We're good together. So
That's a great idea. I do think it's good. I mean, most of us go to the dentist to get a dental cleaning. I mean, why not go to your therapist or counselor to get an emotional tune-up?
yes, I love that. Yes. And thank you for being vulnerable of telling the story about your family and the loss of your grandma and two others. And I know that you have written a poem for her, which I don't want you to read it yet, but I would love for you. And a lot of what I do on the show is we just have those open, transparent conversations that sometimes feel hard for people. But I'm curious, how did it affect you when your grandma died by suicide?
You know, the way that I grew up, there was some religious stuff that that I was trained in, and so the whole view of the family was she won't agree with our belief system, and if she would do that, she would be happy. And so I mean, I was so busy with 3 young children out away from my family in the foreign land of Colorado, and you know, she left me $1,000, and that was really nice. And we moved on. I mean, nobody really talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's a lot of what happened, right? We just don't talk about it.
Well, and she had threatened our whole childhood. So she didn't get along with her daughter, my aunt, who's 94, still alive.
Wow.
But and so she was living in the backyard where my parents had moved to some property in Alabama at the time, and so she was always talking about, I don't know, it just folded into normalcy, I guess. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird to think about that now. Like, why we never talked about it, and she didn't have a service. She was a bitter woman. And so she said if when she died, she wanted to have the march played. I don't know the name of it, but like an upbeat march that celebrates.
Okay.
I could sing it, but that might be weird. But anyway, so it's almost like we were primed my whole childhood for that. So I would have been 28 when that happened.
Okay. So it seemed like, I mean, she almost knew before she died by suicide that was kind of going to be the thing, and or maybe knowing that she's older than everybody, that she's going to end up dying before everybody. Maybe a little bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, she was in her 80s, and she always had eye problems, and she always had hearing problems. So her and my father made me really protect my hearing because I don't want to have hearing loss just because, you know, I grew up with that. And so it was difficult to communicate with her sometimes because of that, or her hearing aids. She was always adjusting them. It's weird how it just sort of was, yikes. And I wanted to know if she saw a picture of my newest baby. That's what I asked. Okay. And my mother said yes, but I hope so.
Yeah. So my brain goes in lots of different ways when we talk, but I always think about when you're at an older age, right? Like I almost kind of reflect on animals in a way. And not saying that suicide is good or bad, or, I mean, it all depends on what you believe and the age, not that it should make a difference. But I know my dad has said to me at one point, like, if I can't remember anything or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, just roll me off a cliff. And I'm like, I'm not rolling you off a cliff, first and foremost, but also you get to this point that and going back to the dogs, like, where is euthanasia a better alternative than having to live in certain, I don't know, mindsets is the word that's coming to my head, but still, it's not the answer or the solution to whatever's going on in your life. Unless, I guess, in my brain is like, if you're like terminally ill and but those are the only times that ever pop up in my brain. And I know everybody all has their opinion on when we talk about later in life. But I believe that is very interesting, that it's almost like this, we're groomed to believe these things and know that it wasn't like a big deal.
It was inevitable.
Yeah.
Like, it was going to happen. And what I thought made it extra messy was she had just had a fight with my dad. Oh. And my dad was the patient one with her. And that's when she did it. Mm. And I was like, but a lot of times I believe that people who have chronic suicidality, they make something or they use something to get that guts to do it. Mm. And I think that she probably convinced herself that, oh, well, he's the last person that, was patient with me and he's not patient today.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the more that I learn and the more classes that I take and the more education, we just started, my nonprofit recently started doing this training called Assist, which is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. I know you're familiar, but it really talks about like our beliefs and how we feel about certain aspects, especially as related to suicide. And it is always just so interesting to hear people's perspective, but then also what leads people to that, right? And I do know, I mean, it can be those super small things. And if somebody's in that space that can kind of get them through that versus like locking in on that thought, then we can save their life, which we know that suicidal ideation or tendencies or like the action of it is very, very short, or like the time frame of it. But yeah, there's got to be this like lead up of the I actually have the guts to do it or take the action of dying by suicide. So yes, that makes it very hard.
Well, and she was a nurse, and so I'm sure she had a stash. That's what she used. And so, but there were all kinds of things she would threaten throughout my childhood. Not to me. I don't know. My parents tried to protect me from all of that. But, I think that she had her ideas. She was a very smart woman. Yeah. And a poet.
And we're going to hear that poem if you're willing. But we're going to go to our first sponsored break. And then once we get back, I wanted to leave it on a cliffhanger a little bit so that you can come back and hear that poem. So we'll be right back after this quick sponsored break.
Have you ever felt completely alone?
Like your life doesn't matter.
One person dies due to suicide every 40 seconds.
You are not alone. Call the National Suicide Lifeline at 988.
Hope and recovery is possible.
1 in 8 people globally live with a mental disorder.
That's why empowering minds saves lives.
We need your help.
With only $19 a month, you help us save lives through mental health and suicide prevention education.
Scan the QR code or go to makementalhealthmatter.org to sign up as a warrior for mental health today.
Hi, I'm Ann Scotland, the host of Global Socialpreneurs. Join the experts, 12 p.m. EST on the Fresh Takes TV network for the best advice on social entrepreneurship. Join us here on E360 TV.
Hi, Laura Cross, your host for Mindful Mondays every Monday at 1 p.m. Central Time, where you can embark on a transformative journey of self-care and ultimate happiness. Tune in to the Voyage to Vitality channel on the Achieve TV network. Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. Be there, be mindful, and join us on E360 TV.
And like that, we're back. If you happen to be just joining the Make Mental Health Matter show, make sure you go back because Valerie and she really shared her story through the loss of her grandma to suicide. Also talking about what she does as a counselor today and her journey leading up to being a counselor. And I left it on a cliffhanger as I normally do with our break, but I know that she made or wrote a poem. So I would love if you want to read it. Can you do that?
Yes.
Cool.
Okay. So I wrote this in March of 2023. When my grandmother completed suicide, I had recently had my third baby. I just wanted to know if she had seen a photograph of him. She had been unhappy my entire childhood. The only time she seemed buoyed was when she saw us. She called me her Miss Priss and said I had false eyelashes. She could not help but give us wet kisses and even went through a feeble attempt to dry her mouth with her hand before she kissed us. She liked to read us books, tell us stories, and do the dishes. After each of my mother's fabulous meals, which she ate so fast, always, she would say, I'll do the dishes, hun, in a kind of sing-song, resigned way. She had her own trauma, I learned after my divorce. Her father had been a sex addict and had passed on a sexually transmitted infection to his wife, my great-grandmother. She had to get corneal transplant surgery during my childhood, and her eyes seemed to always be leaking. I have moisture in my eyes in the morning that I call leaky eye disease in her honor. She crocheted, loved cats, and loved us. But she did not love herself. She had put her 2 children in the orphanage system in New York City during the Great Depression. She tried relying on her family after her young husband died when my father was 5. That only lasted 4 years. She was a nurse, shift work. She would supply coats to her children, yet not let them hug her when she worked as the camp nurse at their summer camps just to see them. She got upset at my father one day, and that's when she did it. I just learned there was a note almost 32 years later. You know, she's the reason we were not allowed to use the word depressed in our household growing up. Even though it was not ever directly discussed, somehow I think our family blamed her because she wouldn't become a Christian and go to church. Maybe that was a coping mechanism. I don't know why this piece of writing came out just now. Maybe because I had a cat and live alone and now I'm the grandmother. Maybe it's just time for some of these stories to be told. Maybe I'm just ready. Maturity is an odd experience. The perspective is profound, yet the young are not aware of what questions to ask. I know I wasn't. I wouldn't say I was ever really relaxed around her, but then I'm an empath and was already caring for my mother. She tried her best to be a loving grandmother, but I think the real gift would have been if she could manage to love herself. Valerie Montgomery, March 14th, 2023.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that you had read that for me when we first met. So I think it's so special that you were able to channel some of that energy, but the willingness to share the stories, which I think is a part of the healing process.
I think it's really important. And as a counselor, I don't get a lot of chances to share my stories.
Yeah, worrying about everybody else. But sometimes you have to take care of yourself to take care of others. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope that if you're listening or watching, you're just understanding that there's lots of different ways to process grief and loss, and writing to release, but also telling the stories, which I love yours because it's very succinct is the word that's coming into my brain, but it's honoring and challenging a little bit, like challenging the quota or the narrative, not the quota, the narrative, but then also really that honoring space too.
Yeah, I liked that I could share some realities of my experiences of my grandmother. I think she was a first-generation American from Germany. Wow. So there's also the immigration factor. My grandfather, her husband, was Cuban, and his family had sent him here to business school. That's how they met in Baltimore, Maryland.
Wow. Wow. That's really cool. Well, thank you very much. And I know, I'm like, where's my brain going? It very soothing as you were also telling your poem. So, I am wondering, so the family, right? We can't talk about depression. We maybe are feeling like we're being groomed to her demise is not the word, but that's a word that's popping into my head. And then really getting into the space of counseling and supporting others and knowing that you had this gift even from young age. So what more of the story would you want to share with the audience?
It's a lot to think about. I got my undergrad in social work, and while I was doing my internship, I saw a residential counselor's master's degree up on the wall, and that's before I graduated. You know, I was already married and expecting my first child, and I thought, I need a master's degree. So I went to grad school when my youngest was 15, and a lot of my life changed at that point with some other challenges. And I just jumped right into it, and it was my next job, my next career, you know. And so this year will be 15 years that I've had my licensed professional counselor credential. I just achieved my licensed addiction counselor credential for Colorado. And we get 40 credits every 2 years in additional of continuing education. And so I have a lot more than that. But I enjoy my work. I enjoy trainings and how I practice. And I help people get to the root. And I like, because once they get, I would use my hands, but there's a microphone. Once they get to the root, it can release and take away all of the lockdown of things that happen after that are reaffirming something that happened in early childhood or even in young adulthood. So it's a developmental approach that I use.
Wow. Yeah, and I think, there's so many different therapies out there, right? Awesome that you got the addiction portion, because that's huge. We've done a ton of deep diving into the addiction and recovery space more recently within the last year, and I didn't realize how large the community was. So that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you
on that. And then, yeah, there's so much. You had mentioned actually earlier, epigenetic trauma, right? So I want to talk about that, but we're going to go to our last quick sponsored break.
Okay.
So make sure you come back, because we're going to talk about epigenetic trauma, which is so fascinating. If you know anything about it, I don't know a ton about it, but we're going to learn more. We'll be right back after this.
1,917 people die daily from suicide globally.
I lost my middle sister, Carrie, to a completed suicide on February 20th, 2017.
How does Make Mental Health Matter save lives?
Number 1. Awareness. My story, however, it isn't unique. I am a domestic violence survivor and a recovering addict. For 14 years, I was in active addiction, and because of Kelli and the work that she does and the opportunity to have my voice heard, I was able to stay clean and sober and have hit a year. I'm still here, and if it wasn't for Kelli answering my call the day that I thought I was going to take my life.
2. Conversation.
I'm curious, and I know that I've heard a lot in the BIPOC community. It is very hush-hush. It's like one of those things that you don't talk about. Like, you literally feel like it's not a conversation you can have. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
First, shout out to Kelli, because I'm glad that she asked the question. I researched you before I went on your show, and I saw how real and authentic you were. And I just appreciate the question, because it is different, and we have to have tough, courageous conversations. So yes, I always say I'm a triple diversity threat. I'm a Black woman with multiple disabilities. Now, I'm not really a threat, but to other people, I may be, because people fear the unknown and what they're uncomfortable with.
Number 3. Education.
Kelli's passionate commitment to mental health awareness is a beautiful thing. It's clear in her social media posts, it's clear in the resources that she puts together, in the activities that she provides, her collaboration with organizations, and the consistent way that she continues to deliver a message, encouraging people to understand that they can share openly and to break the stigma around mental health. Kelli's topics cover children and adults, talk about things that we can do as a community, things that we can do individually, and her website is packed with information and resources and all kinds of contacts that you can use to reach out, whether you're dealing with something yourself or you're looking to help somebody else who is struggling. I encourage you.
And like that, we're back again. If you happen to be just joining the Make Mental Health Matter show, thank you so much. But make sure you go watch the first half of this, because you missed a lot. All right, so Valerie and I I alluded to talking more about epigenetic trauma, which, if you know anything about that word, it just seems so fascinating to me. But tell a little bit more, because I know it has something to do with your genes. But tell a little bit more, like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, so breaking down the word, epi means on, and genes is your genes that make you, color of eyes and right-handed or not, and so what we've learned is across 14 generations, they've done research on traumas that have happened and how it flows down through generations. So it really, I like to use this with my clients, like it's whether the gene turns on or off, and it's all about survival. So if your body believes it needs to turn something on, like hyperarousal, is somebody going to get me? Because 14 generations ago, there was a war. They took my family, and you're alerted, and that's not a good way for your body to be all the time. So it's better if you don't have that hyperarousal on all the time. So sometimes it's about what happened to you in adulthood. Sometimes it's an event trauma. Sometimes, if you look a little further back, is it developmental, and it created neural pathways while I'm growing up that I keep traveling because, well, if I'm wrong, I'm always wrong or something. I have control. If it's my parents that are really wrong, but I can't believe they're wrong, because then I might die because I depend on them for everything. But if I'm wrong, okay, I can live with that. But what if it was during your birth or before your birth, or the traumas that come through generations, famines, people leaving for wars or political climates or all kinds of, things that happen in our world. So if one of my clients comes in thinking it's one thing, and we follow the body, we track the body through a form of breath work that I do to find if they're ready, if they can handle it, we just let something come out and off their nervous system through yawns, smiles, shivers, sometimes hiccups, like there's lots of ways that trauma can come off our nervous system.
Wow. That's so cool. And I know I started getting into a little bit of breath work, and I've had a couple guests on the show actually do breath work, and I never understood the power of that. But I love what you just said, is that it can come in all different forms. And hiccups, I don't know why that just stuck in my head, but I was like, interesting. Like when you're constantly having hiccups, or you're can't ever make them go away. Because I always learn to hold your breath and you're like, don't hiccup. But that's interesting.
It just depends on how your body is going to process it. But just like in secure attachment, if I didn't have the microphone here, secure attachment, where somebody is there attuned and regulated. And so the baby can be attuned and regulated and just grow and spend all their energy resting and digesting and growing. That's secure attachment. But anything else isn't. And so sometimes it could be sneezing. It could be a number of things. But our trauma needs to be, in my opinion, it can be done on your own, like with writing or crying, music, prayer, that kind of thing. But in relationship, because that's our original attachment, is how sometimes I'm the client on this side of the room and hold space for what they're feeling and experiencing. Oh, I just thought of this. I never put that together before. Or, wow, I just got this tightness in my belly. Okay, let's breathe into that. And I have a method for doing that with emotions. So, anyway, it's fascinating work.
Yeah, I mean, I was also talking to somebody kind of about this, is that we could literally be in the same experience and take out different things from it. Because our brain can't process everything. So we distort and delete and generalize a lot of things. So our perception of that specific event could be completely different. And how we lock it in our body, which I'm, doing a lot of things right now, but also reading Body Keeps Score, or The Body Keeps Score, and understanding how, like, the muscle memory and how our bodies lock and store all of our traumas and all those things. But thinking in relation to epigenetics and how it can be passed down from other generations. I mean, my brain actually was like, oh my gosh, we're all screwed, because originally, like, there was so much war, like, back in the day, right? Like, there was a ton of trauma, a ton of experiences that people went through because we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the understanding, and we had a lot of war. Everybody trying to, like, take over their piece of this earth that we live on. But then shifting into this space now where we're understanding, I think it's going to be really cool to watch the generations as they grow, because I feel like they're more open to experience. I totally got chills when I said that, but they're more open to experiencing and releasing. And that generation, I bet you, is going to be so much better off than some of us, maybe.
There's more availability. There are coaches that have training to help people moving forward. There's access to online courses. I have a couple of online courses in my second business, not my clinical. And also there's so many insurances that will cover psychotherapy and counseling. And so there are many options for how to get your needs met. And I think more people are open to counseling. I think the field has grown and the research has grown to help people understand why it works.
Yeah. That's so exciting, because I also know that the mental health space is very inundated, because there are a lot more people that need services than people that are in the field. But I love the availability of the alternative. I know that I do a ton of partnering with the alternative space, like foot zoning and acupuncture and even chiropractors. Like, those are really, I know they're medical professionals, but those alternatives, Reiki, things of that nature, because there's so much more availability. And I think that that's the important part, is that we can have therapists and counselors and people who can help move you through, but like you have added even more modalities to your practice that makes you so unique.
Well, thank you. And I refer to alternative providers as well when I feel a client needs something like craniosacral embryology work. I've had that done myself. So there's a lot of different modalities that help with so many things. So I like to keep my web of support active so that I can share with others who need something other than what I do, or an additional to what I do.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to go just try them all out. I mean, I've done a good chunk, but there's so many more out there that I'm not even familiar with. So, that's amazing to have multiple connections in that space that you can add. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to knock my microphone all over. It doesn't have to be one thing. Like, you can add multiple things on top of, and whatever gets you to that final result that you're looking for. I think that's the best part.
And it's important to understand that there is enough to go around. I like the abundance mindset. And, if I'm not the right fit for you, somebody else is, and I'm going to help you find that right fit.
Yes, I 100% agree. Because maybe we don't click. That's totally okay. I am not everybody's cup of tea, and that is absolutely okay. And I know some other really amazing people in the space, even nonprofit, right? Like, I love the collaborations. It is not competition to me at all. And I think that's such a freeing mindset too.
Well, we're all needed.
Yes.
We're all needed. And the more people can be helpers, then the more availability the culture has.
So we have a few more minutes left, but are there any final thoughts or things that you want to add that maybe we didn't chat about?
Sure. I want to just give one little piece that might be helpful. So I say that emotions are a portal to timeless healing in the body. So track your emotions. The 4 basic emotions are mad, sad, glad, or afraid. And I've even developed a game. I don't know how to get it out there, but it's, Anyway, I just lost it, what it's called, but emotional literacy, the basic 4 feelings game. I came up with this in internship. So basically you can start with the 4 basic emotions. You can even write it on a piece of paper, make 4 quadrants, mad, sad, glad, or afraid, put it on your refrigerator. Everybody in the family can put their special magnet on what they're feeling that day. After you do that for about 2 weeks and you're getting really good with that mad, sad, glad, and afraid. And I usually put upset and emotional in the middle with a line. You can't use those because they don't really describe anything. But you can start using synonyms to up your emotional literacy game. So if I'm used to saying mad, but I can't use it anymore because I've done it for 2 weeks, now I have to say I'm angry. Or if I'm not going to use glad anymore, I'm going to say I'm satisfied or calm, So I think it could be helpful for anyone to start tracking their emotions. It's simple. And then you might be surprised what it shows on, how you're doing. Like, oh, I didn't realize I was, upset every day. What's going on there? Because I believe that there are no negative emotions or positive ones. They're just information about what we need more or less of.
Yeah. So mad, sad, angry, and glad.
Mad, sad, glad, and afraid.
Afraid. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. I feel like those are more heavy negative emotions versus the positive, but glad is the positive emotion.
So most of the time, people aren't struggling if they're feeling good. If they're feeling successful and they're feeling accomplished and they're feeling connected, that's not the people I usually see.
Gotcha.
So mad, sad, glad, and afraid gives an option for all of the emotions, But the ones that are trickiest are the ones that people repress and don't want to deal with or don't know how to deal with. And more than likely, it's about how your family dealt with emotions. And that's your natural or more, your nervous system has created more neural pathways to travel for the ones that your family taught you how to handle when you were growing up. So we're just trying to expand. I have a feelings list too that I give to people, A to Z of feelings. So
I love that. No, thank you for clarifying. I was like, those are really negative, but that's maybe because I want to stay on the positive side. For me, like I am also empathic, not like huge, but I also like absorb people's energy. And when they're really negative all the time, it's very hard on me. And so I always try to stay more on that positive side. I'm like, how can we make this good? How can we, like, I know that everybody's sad, but like, how can we shift this into positive? So that's why my brain was like, wait, most of those are negative. So
here's what I found is when someone's carrying when your needs are not met emotions, the best way is to metabolize that so they don't have to keep carrying it. If they can identify it and let their body release it through some of the ways we've discussed, tears, it could be shouting in your car, window down a little bit, or there's so many ways of expressing in a healthy way what I'm feeling. It releases and you don't have to carry that in your body anymore. So, but you can't repress it your whole life. It turns into, when you get ill.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Shoving down emotions is not good.
Right.
So let them out. And I love the car idea. Like that's definitely, for me, it's singing at the top of my lungs and just like crying, but not while driving. So.
Right. And there's so many ways of processing them. It could be creative colors on a page. It could be anything. Going on a hike, talking to a friend.
Yeah. And if you don't have a friend, find a therapist or a counselor.
Yes.
They're great people to talk to. Well, this was an amazing conversation, and we are coming to the end. It goes so fast. But I would love for you to share, if anybody wants to work with you or follow you or find out more about you, what is the best place for them to do that?
Well, I have a clinical website that's beyondbeautiful.net. And my non-clinical is beyondbeautifulpathways.com.
Say it one more time for the folks that are listening.
Beyondbeautiful.net for counseling for people in Colorado. And my non-clinical with my 2 courses and other offerings is beyondbeautifulpathways.com.
Cool. And I'm assuming they probably connect to each other, hopefully.
On LinkedIn or Instagram, I don't know. On Facebook, I've got Beyond Beautiful Pathways. BB Pathways is on Twitter.
Cool. So they could find you pretty much everywhere.
Yeah.
Good. Well, make sure if you want to follow or find out more about Valerie and what she does, whether it is clinical or not, which I love that you add both of them together because it may or may not work for you, and that's okay. And if it does or doesn't, there's lots of other resources out there too. So thank you so much for being amazing guests and sharing your story about your family and being vulnerable and giving tips for anybody that might be out there that is struggling themselves.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, that was I can't talk anymore. Another amazing episode of the Make Mental Health Matter show. No matter what you do, make sure you come back next Monday. I go live every single Mondays at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on E360 TV, or you can listen on Dream Vision 7 Radio at 5 a.m. or 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So no matter what you do, I will catch you next week. Bye, y'all.